Bible Worm, reading the Bible with Bible Worm.
Welcome to Bible Worm, getting to the core of the biblical text. I'm Dr. Amy Robertson, Director of Lifelong Learning and Music at Congregation Or Hadash in Sandy Springs, Georgia.
And I'm Dr. Robert Williamson, Professor of Religious Studies at Hendrix College and Theologian in Residence of Canvas Community in Little Rock, Arkansas. We're here every week to discuss the biblical text, both as biblical scholars and as people of faith, one Jewish and one Christian.
This week, we read the beautiful and inspiring language of Isaiah 61, a chapter that made us think about the work and the power of restoring human dignity. We saw in this chapter a call to care for both emotional and physical needs, to attend to people in their wholeness. We were reminded that once people remember their own beauty and dignity, they just might not need someone else to rebuild their community for them. They may be ready and able to do it for themselves. And in this moment where many of us may be feeling powerless in the face of systems gone awry, we couldn't miss the message about the power of the word, the prophet, the preacher, in setting things right. Thanks for being with us. Hey, Bobby.
Hey, Amy.
How you doing?
I'm okay. The semester is pushing toward the end.
Uh-huh.
That's hopeful and also stressful.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, it's good. It's okay. It's pretty good.
My college freshman child, he goes to a school nearby. So he lives in the dorm, but he's nearby. And so he comes home every couple of weeks. And he was home this past weekend and is sharing with me some of the important life lessons he is learning. Would you like to know one of them?
I would like to know.
If you are near an open cup, you can put any manner of trash in it. That's his. That's a good lesson to learn. Yeah. I mean, sort of.
Is this like somebody's drinking out of this cup?
No, that wouldn't be empty.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. Fair enough.
But like, is the cup going in the trash? And then you can it's like a vehicle for the rest of the stuff? Or is it like...
You just stick your stuff in there and then somebody else is going to throw that cup away. And then they'll throw your stuff away. I think that's what it is. Because if you were going to throw your stuff away, you would just throw it away.
I am not actually going to share with you the story that led to him sharing this with me.
Yeah.
What was found in a cup.
There are stories about being a college freshman that you just don't want the details of.
No.
Yeah. I do remember the life lessons that you learn your first year in college. They come quick. Like you just like the first semester of college is like a whole like. And
you like teach whole like crews of these people, right?
Do.
Like a whole crowd of people putting their trash in cups.
Yeah, it's funny though because as a professor you're largely insulated. Like we just don't think about their life outside of class that much. I mean, maybe we don't think of their life outside of like business hours. That's the trick to being a professor is you just you treat your students between 8 to 5 and then you just I don't know what happens between 5 and 8. And then you're like,
I'm sure they're fine.
Yeah, it's good.
Someone else is on call now.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, anyway, it is always fun to have him home for a little bit. And you're pushing to the end of the semester. And we are pushing, we're right up against the end of our texts in the Hebrew Bible. Next week, we're moving on.
We are.
To the Gospel of Luke.
Yeah, so this week in the Christian tradition is the text for the third Sunday in Advent. And then next week, we move over to the Gospel of Luke, and we have one text in Advent. And then, whoa, a bird just flew into my window. I bet that hurt his little face. Oh, my goodness.
Oh,
poor little guy. But he flew away, so that was good.
Okay.
So this is the text for the third Sunday in Advent. And then next week is the last Sunday in Advent, and then Christmas, and then we're into the Jesus thing. And then there we go for the spring. Yeah, so this is our last Hebrew Bible text for a while, for the rest of the narrative lectionary cycle.
Yes. It'll circle back.
We'll come back at some point. The endless return of the lectionary.
So the text that the narrative lectionary gives us for this exalted position is Isaiah chapter 61.
Yeah.
We have read some Isaiah already, but as you know better than I do, I think, this book has sort of a complicated, ideas about how it was composed and how the different parts relate to each other. So can you give us a little what we need to know for this section of Isaiah in particular?
Yeah, we saw Isaiah a few weeks ago, and we were in Isaiah chapter 6, which was from the prophet Isaiah ben Amoz, who was a prophet in the 8th century. And the prophecies that relate to the 8th century seem to extend from Isaiah chapter 1 through about Isaiah 39. People, when people started noticing things in the academic, scholarly interpretation of the Bible in the 1800s, started to notice that the prophecies beginning in Isaiah 40 deal with a later time period. And so from Isaiah 40, we start to get the prophecies related to the end of the exile. So suddenly we're at the end of the 6th century instead of the end of the 8th century. Mm-hmm. And so they started to talk about what's known as Second Isaiah, which at that time was thought to be 40 to 66, dealing with the end of the exile and the early return. These are not written, presumably, by the prophet Isaiah ben Amoz himself.
He'd be really old by that time.
They'd be very old by that time. Really or else, maybe he was seeing distantly into the future. But, that's not really the way Hebrew Bible prophets work. They're not like Nostradamus kind of prophets. Yeah. They're insightful seers of what is happening and unfolding in their own time. So scholars came to think of that as later, maybe disciples of Isaiah, like later generations that have been influenced by him, who are trying to take the core message of Isaiah's prophecy and say, well, what would this do in a later time period? How would Isaiah talk to our context? And so that's what we have in Isaiah 40 to 66. Then scholars later on said, actually Isaiah 56 seems to sort of mark a different, yet still, set of texts, which are back in the land of Judea. So Isaiah 40 to 55 seems to reflect a Babylonian context at the end of the exile. Mm-hmm. Isaiah 56 to 66 seems to reflect a Judean context after the exile, when they're back trying to rebuild the temple. Scholars argue about all this stuff, as like scholars like to do. And so, you will find different scholars who will put this together differently. But this text that we have in Isaiah 61 is commonly understood to be an early post-exilic text. So maybe we're somewhere around 520, around the time of the rebuilding of the temple. Or maybe we're a little bit later than that, maybe in the time of Nehemiah. After we've come back from the exile and the Jews are trying to reestablish the community in the land after this sort of traumatic event. And the prophet Isaiah here, sometimes called Third Isaiah or Trito Isaiah, is trying to speak into that context, a message that is consistent with the messages as the prophet understood them anyway from Isaiah many generations earlier.
That is very helpful. I would not want to jump into this text thinking we were still in the 8th century.
In the 8th century? Yeah, that would be very confusing.
Some things have happened
Indeed.
Since then.
Yeah, a whole exile has happened since then. Yeah.
Good. Well, the chapter is only 11 verses and we're going to read the entire thing.
Yes.
And I will warn you in advance that like the pages that I've marked up for this conversation look so crazy that then I had to go back through and like highlight some things that I wrote so I knew what I was like looking at.
Like so many notes. You had to highlight your notes.
I have a lot of questions for you. So,
this will be great.
Buckle your seatbelt.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. Woohoo!
All right, I'm going to start us right up then in verse 1, and I am reading from the NJPS. The Spirit of my sovereign God is upon me, because God has anointed me. I have been sent as a herald of joy to the humble, to bind up the wounded of heart, to proclaim release to the captives, liberation to the imprisoned, to proclaim a year of God's favor and a day of vindication by our God, to comfort all who mourn, to provide for the mourners in Zion, to give them a turban instead of ashes, the festive ointment instead of mourning, a garment of splendor instead of a drooping spirit. They shall be called terebinths of victory, planted by God for glory's sake. And they shall build the ancient ruins, raise up the desolations of old, and renew the ruined cities, the desolations of many ages. I can't believe that was only 4 verses because I have so many questions.
I know there's so much in there. That's such a beautiful text. This text is so rich and hopeful and positive.
Good. Well, yes, please draw out all the beauty.
Yes.
You could use all the.
I will do my very best. Yes.
Use all of it. But I'm going to start with what our teacher, David Peterson, would call a simple-minded question.
Those were never simple-minded. Those were always like cutting to the core of everything.
I know, like we're just cut right to it. Who's talking?
Well, I mean, that is a simple-minded question, and that is very difficult to answer. I just read this as the prophet is speaking. Yeah. And so whoever, the person we call third Isaiah, the speaker of this prophecy, is claiming to be one who has been anointed by God's Spirit to speak this particular kind of message. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of, it's a very like teeny beeny little call narrative or something, right? Like God's Spirit has been poured out upon me. And so here's my commission and here's what I have to say to you. Mm-hmm. It is delightfully ambiguous who is speaking though, which has led to this sort of like history of interpretation, and reclaimings or reconfigurations of this text. And we'll see one when we get to Luke chapter 4 that Jesus is going to claim to be this person who is speaking. Mm-hmm. And so there's lots of possibilities here, but I just read it as the prophet.
Okay, so if we read it as the prophet, do you see then this statement that God has anointed me?
Yeah.
I associate anointing with kings?
Yeah.
Do you think this is like a sort of metaphorical anointment, sort of meaning God has chosen me, honored me, kind of thing?
That's a really interesting observation. Like the Spirit is upon me, that sounds like a prophet or something like that. Or, the judges often have this sort of like the Spirit rushes upon them. But you're right, the language of anointing is king speak. I guess it's also priests were anointed, weren't they?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I don't know where to quite go with that. When you say anointed, like this is kind of a simple-minded answer. My head goes to David in that story in 1 Samuel 16, where he is anointed by Samuel as the king. And if you press that a little bit, then, maybe with David, what you had was the like foundational person of the first iteration of the kingdom of Israel, which then has been decimated in the exile. And so maybe now what you have is the beginning, someone being anointed for this sort of second iteration of Israel or post-exilic Judaism, but it's not a king, it's a prophet. And maybe that indicates a different kind of people or something.
Because it's an interesting time in the history of Israel. They've come back into the land, but they don't have like a king of their own in that period of time. So that's a really interesting way to think about it.
It depends a little bit on where you place this speaker, but if you place the speaker in 520 or so after people began to return from the exile, but before the temple has been rebuilt, then all the structures that organize their life together have been undone. There's no king, there's no temple. They're just like starting over. And so the one thing they've got is this kind of spirit of anointing that is animating some kind of new way of being in the world.
Yeah. And I'm interested. Does your translation connect the idea of the Spirit being upon this person, Isaiah, I guess, and the anointment with the word because? Is that what your translation does?
It does, yeah. So the Lord's Spirit is upon me because the Lord has anointed me. So the anointing has transmitted the Spirit in some kind of way.
Okay. So interesting. Yeah, it feels different to me than the idea of the anointing that we knew of from before.
Yeah.
Earlier in history. Bobby, what do you notice about what this person, what he is sent to do. This is the call we want. Like, we didn't want the call of first Isaiah, right? That was, it was like, oh man, I'm sorry I signed up for that. This sounds much better.
This sounds much better. Yeah. The call of Isaiah in chapter 6 was go and speak words of judgment until everything's going to get cut down. Mm-hmm. This is go speak words of good news that's going to build up. And yes, but it's so interesting that where it begins is speak a word of good news to the poor. And so it starts with the kind of the poor, the oppressed, the marginalized, I love the bind up the brokenhearted. Like, this is more than just economically poor, although I think it includes very clearly economically poor, people in captivity, but also people who are just so broken by the world that their hearts have kind of come undone and need to be like stitched back together again. Yeah. It's good news for those people. And so you don't start, for this prophet, rebuilding the community from the top down and hope it sort of all trickles down to the poor. You start with the people who are most in need of good news, and you build them up, and then things come back together from there.
Yeah, that image of binding the wounded of heart, binding the brokenhearted. It reminds me of Psalm 147 that has that same phrase in it, but it's a descriptor of God in Psalm 147, that God is the one who, tends to the brokenhearted in this way. So it's interesting to see it happening through the prophet.
So then God's spirit of anointing is sort of giving the prophet, and then by extension, maybe us as well, this sort of invitation to carry out God's action toward those.
This is the godly work to do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I have read some very helpful commentaries that have directed me to think about the Jubilee year from Leviticus 25 when reading this text, in particular because there is this reference to the release of the captives. Yeah. Can you remind us what is the Jubilee year, and what does that have to do with this?
Well, I could, but I would love for you to do it since you've been reading about it.
Okay, so the Jubilee year was this year that was laid out in Leviticus 25, I think. And it was to happen every 50th year. And the idea was that if people fell into debt over the course of that period of time and lost their property and maybe became indentured servants, every 50 years, things would sort of be righted again. And so debt would be written off. You would return to the land that you had before. You'd be freed from that indentured servitude that you had up to that point. And it really is I think one of the cornerstones to how the Hebrew Bible is trying, it's not a perfect system, but trying to keep economic differences and economic imbalance from sort of building upon itself over time until you wind up with a class of people who has so much money and a class of people who has nothing.
Yes.
Every 50 years, we go back.
That's so well said, Amy. And one of the things, like when you read here, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor, that sounds like beautiful, but also it's a little mushy, like spiritualized. Like, what does that mean? And, both here, but also especially where you are in Leviticus 25 with the year of Jubilee, like the year of the Lord's favor has very material outcomes, which is this, release to the captives, good news to the poor, liberation for the prisoners, returning of people to their land, freeing of people from indentured servitude. I love the way you talked about that. It's like a total reset of the community. It acknowledges that things can get out of balance. And some people accumulate while some people go into debt. And then it says, but the world can't stay that way. We've got to reset it. And so every 50th year, according to Leviticus, you just reset everything and then off you go again. And so the year of the Lord's favor is a beautiful spiritual thing, but it has very much like economic and social outcomes that should not get lost. I think sometimes it can get lost, but not it's very much a part of the picture here.
And it's so interesting to think about the concreteness of it in the historical period of time that you laid out for us, if they are sort of just coming back to the land, like, everyone lost their land. Everyone was, in exile, maybe not everyone, but the whole system was turned upside down during the exile. And now the idea is for people to come back and be able to be, reunited with their land and sort of reset in an economic system where it's possible to have what you need.
Yeah, Amy, the social context is so complicated, and we get the image from the biblical text that all the people went into the land and the land was empty and then people came back. But that's not really the way that it happened.
Yeah.
A lot of the elite people went into the exile, and just a lot of regular folk just stayed. And then some of the elites came back from the exile. And so you've got this sort of mix of people in the region of Judea in this period, some of whom had been exiled and returned, some of whom had stayed there and worked the land. And they're kind of trying to rework out, like, how do we be a people together? In the book of Nehemiah, chapter 5, we get this image that already, by the time of Nehemiah, who's in the early 5th century, you've already got people, like in Nehemiah 5, some people say, we've had to mortgage our fields and our vineyards and our houses to get grain during the famine. Like, almost immediately when the people return, you get this like economic separation of society again. It happens so fast, which is kind of the way that human societies tend to work. So you're trying to rebuild, but the thing that you start rebuilding is already economically, the scale is tipped. And so you've got to readjust so quick.
Yeah, that's a really helpful sort of reality check. And I feel like makes this call all the more important.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting that this starts out with sort of words with, good news, a herald of joy to the poor or to the humble. And then it has some practical stuff, as we talked about. And then it circles back to comfort all who mourn.
Yeah.
And provide for the mourners in Zion or the mourners of Zion, or it's a little hard to know what that connecting word should be. Do you have any thoughts about why it moves in that particular way, or why we sort of land here back on the mourners and turning around there, imagining a time that they can move out of mourning?
Amy, I had not been paying attention to that, but I really love that observation. So going all the way back in verse 1, to bring good news, but then to bind up, then to proclaim, then to comfort. And so you get this sort of combination of like attending to people's emotional needs, but also attending to their physical needs.
Yeah.
I really love that, at one level, the problem is that people have become poor and they've been enslaved or they've been put in debtor's prison or whatever. But the real situation is that everybody is brokenhearted. And so I love that idea that these two things always come together, and you've got to attend to the people in their wholeness as people and not only to their physical selves.
Yeah.
You have to do the physical part.
Yes.
Like, you can't just comfort people and not feed them.
Yes.
But you can't just feed people and not comfort them either. Like, what they really need is to feel whole and well again.
Yeah, those things fit in together. And that makes it so, I feel like that sort of brings even to more stark relief this description of sort of trying to guide or nudge people out of their state of mourning and into this time. I mean, splendor is kind of a big word, but kind of nudge them towards this place of dignity and real beauty. I mean, they shall be called terebinths of victory. We don't use the word terebinths enough in modern English, but they're like big oak trees, right?
Yeah, that's exactly
right. What an image.
Yeah.
Like, what dignity and grandeur to be planted for glory's sake.
Yeah.
That's a real lifting out of sitting in ashes.
That language calls you back to Isaiah 6. Remember where everything was going to get cut down and cut down and cut down and burned. And then it said the stump is the holy seed. And so that was an image of like the tiny little thing that's there in the midst of the destruction. Now that has become an oak of righteousness, which is, I mean, exactly right. Like now it's this tremendous, strong, powerful thing that is there where once there was only a seed.
I forgot about that connection. I love it. I love it.
I appreciate your language there of dignity. You know, the state of the people is ashes, mourning, and discouragement.
Yeah.
And so there is only sadness. There's only like signs of mourning. Yeah, it's they are lacking in any feeling of being dignified people. And then what you get is a garland, joy, a mantle of praise. So you clothe them in these marks of their beauty. And so now they can feel dignified. I really like that. I really like that a lot.
I was listening yesterday to an interview with a priest who was out, I think, in Los Angeles and you probably have heard of this guy. He's quite famous. He established like a place where gang members could go get education and get a job and get, like have other alternatives to this, this life that they had sort of wound up in through whatever had unfolded in their own lives. And I actually stopped while I was listening to write down a quote. And what he said was, sometimes it's necessary to reteach a thing its loveliness.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And he said that really was what he felt like his job was.
Yeah. Is that Greg Boyle from Homeboy
That is
Industries?
Greg Boyle. Yes, thank you.
I visited out there with some students a few years ago. That place is amazing, amazing. Yeah. I love that. You have to reteach them. What was the quote? Reteach them their dignity?
Sometimes you have to reteach a thing its loveliness.
Its loveliness, yeah.
And I see some of that in here. Like the people are in such a state that they need someone else to help them see their own loveliness again.
One of the things I love about this is, it's clothing that has been placed upon them. They're wearing like a garland and a mantle, and like they're being clothed in dignity, which is this sort of marking them as beautiful to the outside world. Mm-hmm. And so then that they can come to believe it themselves, I think.
Yes.
Instead of just like saying, come on, you're beautiful, right? It's like showing their beauty to the world so that then they can come to believe it themselves or something like that.
Bobby, I know we need to move on soon, but there's one other thing that I would love to get your take on.
Yes.
In verse 4, so up to here, these first 3 verses have been pretty much, it sounds like the speaker, the prophet, is the one doing stuff.
Yeah.
And then in verse 4, they shall build the ancient ruins.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that just feels like such a profound shift to me.
Yeah.
And I wonder what you would say about it.
I really love that, Amy. So it starts with God, who anoints the prophet, who speaks to the people, reminds them of their beauty, and then they go and rebuild the world. So you've got this kind of outward flow that originates with God. And once the people recognize their dignity, and once they're clothed in this sort of righteousness, then they are able to go out and recreate the community for themselves. Mm-hmm. I really love that. And it's not, so then it's not that some sort of like prophetic voice like creates what that person thinks the community needs, but it's that the community itself is the one who goes and ultimately is tending to its own rebuilding. Yeah. But what they needed was a voice to proclaim. They needed speech to make it possible for them to go out so that they could believe it could be done, and then they could go out and do it themselves. Yeah. I love that, especially thinking about, preachers that I think sometimes preaching feels like you're not doing anything. Mm-hmm. And also like the weight is too much. Like, how can we fix the world? And in some ways, this addresses both of those things to say, like, the proclamation of good news to the poor is the thing that transforms the world. And so you don't have to go and rebuild the ruins, but you do have to speak a word of possibility. You have to speak a gospel to people that gives them dignity, and then they'll go and do it.
Yes. Yes. If you can care for their hearts and care for their practical needs and in a way that empowers them to do it themselves, then yes, this is the ideal. Then they do it.
Exactly.
They go rebuild.
But without the proclamation, they could never get there.
That's right. All right. I think we'd best move on soon, but is there anything else you really need to say about these first couple verses?
Well, the only other thing I want to say is that you skipped a day of vindication for our God, which Jesus also skips in verse 2. Jesus is also going to skip that in Luke 4. You didn't skip it like when you read it, but we didn't talk about it because all this other stuff is like beautiful building things up. And then you just get that 1/2 verse that's a year of the Lord's favor and also a day of vindication. Or a day of what does the JPS have?
It has a day of vindication. But what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, one can read that as sort of a day of vengeance, which I think is sometimes that is translated that way. But for me, vindication could just be read to mean God has had a vision for how the world should be, and the world has not been that way. And so when you declare the year of the Lord's favor, then the world is going to be transformed closer to the way God has in mind, and that's going to vindicate this vision that God has had.
Yeah.
I think it's often read, though, as like a day of judgment against somebody.
Interesting. I would have to say, that didn't even occur to me from the context. It just sort of seemed like, yeah, God's model for the world had been often exile and then coming back to these, ruins and all the economic systems are shifted and all this, whatever. So a day of vindication seems like a day of saying like, no, you were right.
Yeah.
And now we can do the thing that you wanted us to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess you could turn it into a war if you want to. Bobby.
I like that way of reading it. Yeah, the Hebrew nakam often means like vengeance, but it can also mean retribution or something like that. I like vindication. Let's go with that. Let's just stick with that. That's beautiful.
Great.
Let's not pull that thread too hard.
Hi, y'all. It's Amy, one of your friendly co-hosts, and I want to tell you why Bible Worm is important to me. There's a Jewish tradition that Torah study is best done with a partner, a hevruta, we call it, someone who pushes you beyond where you would have gone on your own. Bobby was essentially my hevruta for 10 years of grad school, and I've never found a thought partner quite like him. So when he asked if I wanted to read text together, there was no real thought process before I said yes. The decision to record this podcast the way we do was risky. We don't have a script. We don't pre-talk things. We are thinking together live. And it is my hope that precisely because of that, you feel invited to think along with us. Because everyone needs a hevruta. And if you don't have one, I hope you will let us be yours. If this way of being in relationship to biblical text speaks to you the way it speaks to me, I hope you'll help sustain us through Patreon at whatever level makes sense for you. There are some nice perks if you need them. Liturgies, videos, monthly discussion groups. This year I've added some recordings of the chanting of these texts that you might hear in a synagogue. Or you can just support us to show your appreciation and help us know that this work matters. Thanks for listening and for supporting us however you can. All right, you ready to pick up verse 5? Okay. Strangers shall stand and pasture your flocks. Aliens shall be your plowers and vine trimmers. While you shall be called priests of God and termed servants of our God, you shall enjoy the wealth of nations and revel in their riches. Because your shame was double, men cried, disgrace is their portion. Assuredly, they shall have a double share in their land. joy shall be theirs for all time. For I, God, love justice. I hate robbery with a burnt offering. I will pay them their wages faithfully and make a covenant with them for all time. Their offspring shall be known among the nations, their descendants in the midst of the peoples. All who see them shall recognize that they are a stock God has blessed. Bobby, there are two different moments in my reading that I had to really hold back from starting to laugh.
Yeah, it was one of them, the aliens.
One of them was the aliens. Yes, I want aliens to plow. I mean, can you picture like aliens coming to mow your lawn?
Take me to your lawnmower. Yeah. That would be amazing. I had exactly the same thought, which I don't know what that says about us, but
yeah, well,
yeah.
Here we are.
Here we are.
Okay, so I want to at least point out, and we can hold this loosely for now, or maybe you have a thought to start us off, but now we have shifted to the second person.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know, just has sort of a different feeling about it to me. So now this is, I guess, Isaiah is speaking directly to the people instead of talking about what will happen.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Mm-hmm.
Bobby, I'm not really sure what to do with this whole, like, other people are going to do your chores.
Yeah.
Do you read this as just like a classic, like, reversal of who gets the honored position and who is doing the less honored stuff?
That is the way that I read it. This is also very troubling to me. And I will tell you that on the Bible Worm Collaborative, we spent a long time talking about how troubling this was to us.
Yeah.
I think largely because of the position that most of us have in society as it is currently structured, in which if you say to someone who is already kind of well off, hey, the foreigners are going to till your garden, like that sounds like the continuation of an unjust system. I mean, it is.
Yeah.
I think in context, you know, that the people of Israel have been exiled and they have been working on behalf of Babylon for some time. And they have not been in their own place. They have not been raising their own food. They've not been doing these things. And so if you read this as reversal, then it is the things you have spent your time, energy, and labor lifting up somebody else. Now they're going to do that for you. Mm-hmm. And I mean, maybe not voluntarily, like that's just the way it's going to be, but like you're going to get repaid for the things that the things that were done to you exploitatively. Now those are going to be repaid to you. But it's a very fine line there between like, and now we're just exploiting some other.
Yes. No, we have to be very careful with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would read this, I think, along the lines of Hannah's speech that we read a little while back, where you have this sort of reversal. And we also said there, like, you got to be careful how far you take that.
Yeah. I wondered too, this might be a little bit too soft maybe for the context or imprecise, but I've had this question in my head just generally lately, like what would the phrase we would use in Hebrew is olam haba, the world to come, like this imagined perfected future look like. And so part of this is I wonder if I can read it legitimately as just like someone else will do that stuff so that I can spend my time.
Yeah.
So that I can serve God.
Yeah.
I guess I wonder how much thought and attention the authorial voice here is giving to who it is who's doing that other stuff, or if the important thing is that you don't have to spend your time on that and you'll finally get to spend all your time and energy serving God.
I like that. So focusing on you will be the priests of the Lord, ministers of our God.
Yeah.
As the key point.
As the key point, and saying, yes someone else is going to do this other stuff. We don't know who's going to do it, aliens. But
yeah. I like that reading a lot.
But I take your warning very seriously about the kind of economic system that would set up.
And this is a tension all the way through the biblical text, And so it's not surprising to see it again here. But I think that idea of you will have time once again to worship God the way you were intended to worship God is a lovely reading of it.
Yeah.
And the labor that you have had exploited from you will be returned to you in some way. I think that's right on. But I, who am a leisure class person, have to be thoughtful about how I receive that.
Yeah, no, I think both those things are true. Bobby, I'm having some trouble understanding verse 7.
Yeah.
Part of my trouble is that it starts out with, again, speaking to the people of Israel, your shame was double. And then it says, they shall have a double share in their land. It sort of shifts back to third person.
Yes.
Is this, do you just understand this verse as saying, because things were so bad for you before, now they're going to be that much better? Like, am I just trying too hard to understand nuance in here when it's not actually that complicated?
The Hebrew is messy for sure. And the CEB has solved it just by translating your portion as their portion. And then you just the problem goes away, which is kind of nice. And, I try to struggle through a little bit, but it seems like you could spend a lot of energy on there. But I think what I take from it is a couple things. One is, do you remember back in Isaiah 40? I mean, I know that you do. When the voice comforting Zion says, you have paid double for all your sins.
Yes.
She has paid double for all her sins. So there's this idea in Isaiah writ large that the people have sort of overpaid. They were over.
There were sins. Yes.
Yeah. And they were over punished for it. And so here you get they used to have double shame and people were making fun of them. And then now they're going to get double portion back. And so God is making good, like you did experience double shame and now you're going to receive a double portion. Which reminds me in an interesting way of Hannah. Remember that weird bit in 1 Samuel 1 where maybe it said Hannah only received one portion or maybe it said she received a double portion?
Yes.
If you read that as double portion, then there's the connection there in that Samuel text between shame and double portion, which you see again here. So but at the end of the day, I just read this as you have experienced great shame. And so your reward is going to be equally great. I think you could probably make it more complicated than that if you wanted to.
No, but I think that makes sense that there is some sense that the system is writing itself. Just like we talked about, even if we're thinking about the Jubilee year, like the system is reset. But in this case, it's sort of not just going back to zero, but taking into account that you paid more than you should have. And so now you will be repaid that much more.
Yes. There's a time of abundance coming, not just a time of restoration to the status quo.
Yes. Bobby, what on earth does it mean for God to say, I hate robbery with a burnt offering? Is that like, I hate it with a fiery passion?
No, I had not read it that way, but I kind of want to play with that. Like, I'm going to burn your robbery like a burnt offering. Yeah.
How do you understand that?
There's a couple of ways of reading it. The Hebrew word there, olah, some people will read that as avla, which means like dishonesty or something. So then the verse would say, I hate robbery and dishonesty, which is how the CEB translates it. I think that's a little, I don't know. It feels like a little bit like a cop-out to me. That's what Robert Alter does, though, so I'm not going to quibble with Robert Alter.
Right. He doesn't usually go with the cop-out.
But your translation, I hate robbery with a burnt offering, takes my mind to something like Amos, where don't come and make your offerings to me while you're stealing from the poor. So I hate that. So don't do that. We've been here before.
That hypocrisy.
Yeah.
Oh, I really like that, Bobby. I really like that. Okay, this is my last question for this section. It's the very end, verse 9. I am wondering why. The text says they are a stock or a seed God has blessed. And I'm wondering why you think it's important that we be referring to like a stock or a seed instead of they are a people who is blessed or a person or that just seems like such a specific reference to their source.
There's so many interesting things in there, Amy. One is that the word seed that was used back in Isaiah 6, that they will be the holy remnant will be a seed. And so here you see that word again. And so that they have grown, or that they are growing, shows that they were this tiny little seed blessed by God. It also takes me back to the originary covenant that God made with Abraham in Genesis 12, which said your seed will be, I forget exactly how it goes, but will be numerous.
Yes.
And they will be blessed to be a blessing. Mm-hmm. And so you sort of see that sort of, we've got covenant language here anyway, like I'm going to restore the covenant. And then so here we get the reference back to that covenant.
I like that a lot.
We also get another reference here to God's, here it's the people's reputation. People will recognize that they're people blessed by the Lord. But like when they recognize that you're blessed by the Lord, they're also recognizing that God is a God who blesses. And we've had this kind of recurring theme this fall in this fall's text about God's reputation and the ways in which God is made known either by people being vindicated or by the people being punished. And so there's a lot going on just right here in this one little spot.
Bobby, I think I would like to take us to the end. Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. So I'm going to pick up in verse 10. I greatly rejoice in God. My whole being exults in my God, who has clothed me with garments of triumph, wrapped me in a robe of victory, like a bridegroom adorned with a turban, like a bride bedecked with her finery. For as the earth brings forth her growth and a garden makes the seed shoot up, so my sovereign God will make victory and renown shoot up in the presence of all the nations. Yeah, there's that seed language again.
Yeah.
I have the same question I had in the beginning, and I wonder if your answer is the same as it was in the beginning. Who is the I?
I still would read that as the prophet.
Yeah.
Would you read it differently than that?
Not necessarily, but then who has clothed me with garments of triumph?
Yeah. You kind of want that to be the people, don't you?
Yeah. One possibility that I read, I'm not sure that I want to grab onto it, but is that the opening, the first person in the first part of this, the me, the I, and here at the end could be read as as Zion itself.
Yeah.
Which is interesting to me mostly because, it sort of solves that problem of, who exactly is getting honored in this way. But I like the way it ties the honoring of the people to the honoring of the city and sort of the fates of the people and the fates of the city in a way that I think is true to the way that authors at this time, that the community at this time really saw those things as being inextricably tied.
I like that, Amy. I would have to do a little work to how do you get to Zion here? Like the speakers in the second part of Isaiah obviously are not always clear.
Yes.
But I like that way of reading it to connect this with Zion and with the people. And other way of reading it is this sort of concentric structure where you start with the prophet, you move to the glorification of the people, and then back to the prophet. And so it becomes, the prophet is given a task which turns the people into a blessed terebinth, which then comes back to the glory of the prophet. Do you know what I mean? So the prophet's glory is kind of secondary to the people's glory.
Right, because the prophet has done his work here, has gone and spoken the word and released proclaimed release for captives, and that enabled the people to see their own loveliness and rise out of mourning and rebuild the city.
And then the prophet says, and then that's my glory.
I like that, Bobby, because earlier in our conversation you were talking about everything sort of originating from God, and then going to the prophet, and then going out to the people. And I feel like I've seen that loop sort of close before coming back to God. All of this is a demonstration of God's goodness and power and, to the good of God's reputation and all of that. And this is sort of an intermediate step. It goes back first to the human mouthpiece of God and then presumably back to God's own reputation.
I do think I'm just paying attention to the sort of internal sense I have that like I'm glad God's getting a good reputation here. I'm glad the people are getting a good reputation. But when the prophet seems to say like, and also me, I'm like, wait a second, you can't, like, don't take credit for that. Come on, man. And I'm just curious about, like, it seems like perfectly reasonable that the prophet would also get to be lifted up. But maybe it's my Protestant work ethic, or I don't know, like, exactly what it is. But I'm like, no, man, you can't just talk like that about yourself. Come on.
I mean, going back to that conversation with Father Boyle that I heard the other day that was about showing people their own loveliness. Another thing that he said that is helping me tie these things together right now is that for him, it was important to find a way to keep remembering that this ministry is not about how he can change people, but how he can be changed by people. Like he said, you go to the margins to do work, not to change people, but to be changed by the margins.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering about, yes, I, like you, want to say, like, who cares about what it's like for the prophet? Like,
yeah.
And we know the reality is that this was incredibly difficult work to do.
Yeah.
And so, of course, it would change the prophet to do this work in some way.
No, I really love that way of thinking about it. And the way that I understand what Father Greg is doing is he is going to change people, but not by way of like having an agenda for how they should change. But what you said earlier, that he is reminding them of their intrinsic beauty and their dignity. And that is something like he's going to say, you are beautiful and valuable and dignified. And then they grow from there. Yeah. And then that changes, and then that reflects back on him. That changes him. And they remind him of his beauty. Mm-hmm. I like that way of thinking about it. And so here the prophet maybe is also saying, yeah, I'm going to get to share in this. I'm going to get to share in this thing too. When things start to take shape among the people, it's going to remind me that I too am adorned like a bridegroom. I like that.
Yeah.
Can you give me your verse 11 again?
For as the earth brings forth her growth and a garden makes the seed shoot up, so my sovereign God will make victory and renown shoot up in the presence of all the nations.
I have a couple of thoughts on that. Like, so we don't just land on the prophet, if that's how we're going to read that, but we also then come back here to like the people.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Is this fertile ground? And that I've been studying Genesis with a group at church. And so this just reminds me of that Genesis 2 creation story where God plants the garden and the garden grows. And so it's like a new creation, and that's going to be the people in the land. The Hebrew there in verse 11 seems to me to say righteousness and praise.
I have written in the margin next to mine, righteousness and praise. Like, why are we saying victory and renown? Although more and more I've been noticing sometimes that word tzedakah is translated as victory. And I'm like, no, righteousness.
Yeah. I like the idea of God growing righteousness and praise. And so like righteousness I take to mean like acting rightly, like doing the things for the community that God has asked to be done for the community. And praise I take to be praise for God. And so, in that little verse right there, it's love God, love neighbor, right? It's the core of Deuteronomy. And God is planting that, which is going to result in righteous treatment of the neighbor and praise toward God. And that's going to be the essence of this new thing that's coming into being.
And in some ways, I feel like it ties a little bit back to the beginning when we were saying, like, some of the work the prophet has to do at the beginning is just speaking a gentle, comforting, good word to people.
Yeah.
And then there's also like proclaim release to the captives. Like there's also some practical stuff that we have to address here. So also this brings out that your point brings out the power of speech, of praise, and also righteousness, which of course you can have righteous speech, but I associate it more with action.
Yeah.
Well, Bobby, this is a beautiful and rich text to have during Advent, to have as our last text that we are reading from the Hebrew Bible before we move on to the New Testament for a while. What is really speaking to you in this text today?
I'm really kind of inspired by this text, which I think is what this text is trying to do. But, historically, this text is spoken by the prophet into a context that is in disarray. The people have been through exile. They are trying to rebuild something without the structures that they're familiar with. They don't have a king. The temple is in ruins. And it seems like a hopeless situation. And all that God has really given the prophet here is a charge to go and speak good news into a context where it seems like there is no good news to be found. And that good news starts with the people who are most desperate, the poor, the oppressed, the imprisoned, the brokenhearted. You speak to them a word of hope. And I love this language that you've been using of reminding them of their beauty or reminding them of their inherent dignity and that God is starting to do something new. And that's what you've got, is that speech against all probability that God is going to create something new out of this shambles amongst the most shambled of the people, the ones who are most at the margins and most brokenhearted. And once they remember, once they are clothed in dignity, then they rebuild this world into this kind of beautiful, fertile place for praise. And I guess I'm feeling a little brokenhearted at the moment, and in this season, like in this December moment and the middle of winter, and it's dark and the times are uncertain, and I don't feel like I've got much. And what this text says is you don't actually have to have that much. Like, you just have to speak a word of hope into a context that is hopeless and remind people who are feeling undignified that they have inherent worth, and that God honors that, and the community is fully capable of rebuilding itself. And you just have to trust that that's true, even if you don't have the blueprint for how to rebuild it right now. That's not the point. The point is proclaim the year of the Lord's favor, that the world can yet still be different, and that people can be released and restored to their rightful place in the world. Mm-hmm. It doesn't feel like much to me, but like at a time when I don't feel like I've got much, and where this text ends with like the people as like this garden of righteousness that is a sign to the world. Like, it ends in this just like beautiful, like springing forth of a new creation. But it starts with, gotta go say something to the brokenhearted.
Yes.
That feels hopeful to me.
I think that's really beautiful, Bobby, and spot on for this moment in the world. Yeah, we get a lot of messages about what we do or don't deserve, or what is or isn't possible, or what relationships between different communities look like, if you're watching certain news channels and whatnot, and to have someone counter that and say like, no, you are lovely.
Yes.
And sort of help you see your own worth, can really change things.
Yes.
I think on the one hand that I would, I might have gone exactly in the same direction you did, but since you already went in that direction, I'll go in a slightly different direction. This part at the beginning where we've been talking about being a herald of joy to the poor, that word anavim can mean poor or can mean humble, which again can be tied to poverty or can just mean a person with a lot of humility.
Yeah.
And so one interpretation that I've heard that has really stuck with me is to notice that for the people who are humble, they are sent, a good word to try to incline their spirits toward joy. But the captives get release. Like the other people get more concrete things.
Yeah.
And the way that I've heard this talked about is a little bit of a nudging when things are not right in the world and are not right in your world, to don't be too humble to just take it and just say, this is the world that there is. But instead to call out injustice in your own life, injustices done to you or to the people around you.
Yeah.
To call them out to God, certainly, and to call them out to systems that might be able to help them. Because maybe there is yet more that can be done. So I'm holding on to that, because sometimes I think it is more comfortable for me to assume a kind of a low bar of what is possible in a way that can be productive and helpful and prevent disappointment, but maybe keeps the bar lower than it needs to be.
Yeah.
So it's important to cry out. It's an important thing to name injustice. And who knows? Maybe it can be changed.
Amen.
Well, Bobby, next week we begin reading from the book of Luke.
Yeah.
We'll begin in chapter 1, partway through, verses 26 to... It says either 45 or maybe we'll continue to 56. We usually do the longer ones.
Yeah, we ever seen a bracket so we don't read.
Why? Yeah. Good. Yeah. I look forward to jumping back into Luke with you. It's been a minute since we've
It's been a little bit since we've been in the gospel. Yeah, and especially the gospel of Luke.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it.
Well, until then, my friend, be well.
You too, Amy. See you next time.
Thanks for joining us for this week's episode of Bible Worm. If you've enjoyed this free podcast, we hope you'll help us keep it going by joining our Patreon for as little as $4 per month. You can also sign up for other goodies like early access, video lectures, weekly liturgies, and more. Visit patreon.com/BibleWormPodcast for details.
Bible Worm is produced and edited by Bobby Williamson. Our theme song is sung by Colin Bagby, and our theme music is The World at Large by Dano Songs. Many thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping make this podcast possible.
Join us again next week as we begin something new, the New Testament, that is, with the first chapter of Luke, our gospel reading for this year. Until then, keep on digging.